You think being smart protects you. It doesn't. It makes you the perfect target. Here's what nobody tells you. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with power or money. It's the one who pretends they don't understand. Idiots don't manipulate you with logic. They manipulate you with chaos. They confuse, exhaust, and gaslight you until your own intelligence becomes your prison. And the worst part, you won't even see it happening, because your brain is too busy making sense of something that was designed to never make sense. Drop a comment below right now. Have you ever felt crazy trying to explain the obvious to someone who simply refused to get it? Because what you experienced wasn't stupidity, it was a strategy. Stay. Because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see every relationship in your life. The intelligence trap. Nobody warns you about. Let's start at the beginning. Not at the moment you realized something was wrong, but way before that. Let's start at the moment you first believed that being smart meant being safe. From the time we're young, we're told that intelligence is the answer. Study hard, think clearly, be logical, use reason, and the world will reward you. We carry that belief into every conversation, every relationship, every professional environment we walk into. We believe that if something doesn't make sense, we just need to think harder. We believe that if someone doesn't understand us, we just need to explain better. We believe that confusion is always innocent, always accidental, always fixable with the right words. That belief is exactly where the trap is set. Because here is the raw, uncomfortable, never talked about truth. Intelligence is not armor. Intelligence is, in very specific circumstances, the most exploitable thing about you. Not because you're weak, but because of what intelligence does to the way you process the world around you. Intelligent people seek patterns. They need resolution. They cannot easily sit with something that doesn't make logical sense. So when they encounter someone who behaves irrationally, they don't walk away, they don't dismiss it. They lean in, they analyze, they try to understand. They extend patience, empathy, and time, because their brain is hardwired to find the answer that makes everything click. And that hardwiring, that beautiful, relentless drive toward understanding, is the exact mechanism that certain people learn to exploit. Not because those people are brilliant strategists, not because they've read psychology books, but because they've spent their whole lives watching what works. And what they've learned through pure trial and error is this: if you keep a smart person confused, they will never stop trying to figure you out. And while they're busy figuring you out, you control them completely. The trap was never about making you look stupid. It was about keeping you busy. Busy analyzing, busy justifying, busy defending, busy trying to make sense of something that was never meant to make sense. That is the foundation of everything we're going to talk about today. Not stupidity as an accident, not confusion as a mistake, but stupidity as a weapon, confusion as a strategy, and the intelligent, empathetic, analytical person as the intended target. And once you see it, really see it, you cannot unsee it. So let's go deeper. What weaponized stupidity actually looks like. Let's define exactly what we're talking about, because this is where most people get it wrong. When we hear the word manipulation, we picture someone calculating, cold, deliberate. We picture someone who is clearly smarter than everyone around them, pulling strings from behind the curtain. And because of that image, we completely miss the manipulation that's happening right in front of our eyes, performed by people who appear to be the exact opposite of calculating. This is weaponized stupidity, and it is one of the most effective psychological tools that exists precisely because it looks like nothing. It looks like helplessness. It looks like confusion. It looks like someone who just can't quite understand what you're saying. And your intelligence, your empathy, your patience, your drive to communicate clearly makes you the perfect mark for it. Here is how it works in real life. You make a clear, logical point. The other person looks confused, not offended, not argumentative, just confused. And the moment you see that confusion, something activates in you. The teacher instinct, the communicator, the person who genuinely wants to be understood. So you rephrase it, you give an example, you break it down differently, you slow down and try again. And then something interesting happens. They don't suddenly understand, they find a new angle to be confused about, or they latch onto one tiny word you used and turn it into an argument about that word, or they shift the entire conversation to how your explanation made them feel. And now, somehow, your original point is completely buried. The conversation has moved entirely into terrain that benefits them and exhausts you. That confusion was never real. The helplessness was performed, and your intelligence, your insistence on being understood, handed them the rope to tie you with. This happens in relationships, it happens in workplaces, it happens in families, it happens in friendships. Someone plays dumb about a commitment they made, and now you're the one clarifying whether they actually agreed to it. Someone acts confused about why you're upset, and now you're spending 20 minutes explaining your emotions while the original behavior goes completely unaddressed. Someone pretends not to understand a boundary you set, and now you're softening the boundary just to make them more comfortable accepting it. Every single time, the pattern is the same. You start with clarity, they introduce confusion, you chase the clarity. They control the conversation. You end up exhausted, they end up having gotten exactly what they wanted. And the most insidious part? By the time it's over, you don't even realize what happened. You just feel tired, a little hollow, a little like you failed to communicate something important. You replay the conversation in your head, trying to figure out where it went wrong. You think about what you could have said differently. You blame yourself for not being clearer. That self-blame is the final payoff, because a person who is blaming themselves is not a person who is holding someone else accountable, and that is exactly the outcome the manipulator needed, the reality flip, when your truth becomes their crime. Now let's talk about the second major tactic, because weaponized stupidity is just one layer of this. The next layer is something that will make you question your own sanity if you don't understand what's happening. It's called the reality flip, and it is surgical in how precisely it can dismantle a person's confidence in their own perception. Here's the setup. You come to someone with a concern, something they did that hurt you, confused you, or crossed a line you needed them to respect. You've thought about it carefully. You've chosen your words deliberately. You're approaching it calmly, rationally, because you know that's the right way to have a difficult conversation. And then something happens that you don't expect. Instead of engaging with what you said, they immediately become the victim of your having said it. Suddenly, the concern you raised becomes an attack on their character. Your calmness becomes cold and calculated. Your clarity becomes aggressive. Your reasonable expectation becomes controlling. Your boundary becomes punishing them. Your feelings become evidence of your instability. The subject has changed completely. It is no longer about what they did. It is now about how you chose to address it. And they're not just deflecting, they're reframing your reality with such conviction that you start to doubt your own. Did you come across as aggressive? Were you being too harsh? Is this really about control? Is the problem actually me? This is the reality flip in full motion. The original issue disappears, the conversation pivots to your character, and you spend the rest of the interaction defending who you are instead of addressing what they did. What makes this tactic so devastatingly effective is that it leverages your own intelligence against you, because a thoughtful person actually considers the possibility that they were wrong. They genuinely reflect, they genuinely ask themselves whether the feedback has merit. A person who doesn't care about being fair doesn't stop to wonder whether they were too harsh. Only someone with integrity does that. And the manipulator has learned, consciously or not, that throwing this question at you is enough to freeze you mid-conversation. The reality flip is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's delivered softly, with wounded eyes, in a quiet voice. I just didn't expect you to come at me like that. That one sentence. That's all it takes. Your brain immediately starts reviewing the last 5 minutes of conversation, wondering what "like that" meant, wondering whether you misjudged your tone, wondering whether you owe an apology. Meanwhile, they're sitting completely still, waiting, because they know exactly what's happening in your head right now. And here's the part that is almost impossible to see in the moment. The more emotionally intelligent and self-aware you are, the more vulnerable you are to this exact move. Because people who aren't reflective don't stop to question themselves. People who don't care about fairness don't worry about whether they were too harsh, but you do. And that capacity for honest self-reflection, which is genuinely one of your strengths, becomes the lever they pull. The reality flip doesn't just change the subject, it changes the entire frame of the relationship. Over time, if this happens repeatedly, you begin to edit yourself before conversations even begin. You pre-apologize. You soften things that don't need softening. You approach important topics with anxiety instead of confidence. You've been trained, not through any single moment, but through the accumulated weight of every reality flip, to believe that speaking your truth is dangerous. That is not an accident. That is the outcome they needed. A person who is afraid to speak clearly is a person who will never hold them accountable for anything. Exhaustion as a strategy, why they never let conversations end. This next one is almost mechanical in how it works, and once you understand it, you will recognize it instantly every time it happens. It is not a psychological sleight of hand. It does not require emotional complexity or sophisticated language. It requires only one thing: stamina. More specifically, it requires that the manipulator outlast you. Exhaustion as a strategy, the circular argument that never resolves. The conversation that somehow stretches for 2 hours without reaching any conclusion. The debate that resets itself every time you get close to making a point land. The discussion that starts at one topic, drifts to 3 others, circles back, introduces new grievances, revisits old ones, and never, not once, arrives at a place of clarity or resolution. This is not accidental. The person who exhausts you in conversation is not confused about the point. They are not struggling to understand. They are doing something far more deliberate. They are keeping the conversation alive and unresolved, because a conversation that never concludes can never reach a verdict. And a verdict, a clear, fair conclusion about what happened and who was responsible, is exactly what they cannot afford, so the conversation keeps moving. Every time you come close to making something land, every time the logic becomes undeniable, something shifts, a new detail is introduced, a past grievance is resurrected, your tone is suddenly questioned, your memory is suddenly disputed, the goalposts move. And you, being the thoughtful person you are, follow them. Because you want to address everything fairly, because you want to make sure no legitimate concern goes unheard, because you believe, genuinely believe, that if you can just get to the right angle, the right framing, the right moment of clarity, something will change. Nothing changes. Because the goal was never resolution. The goal was exhaustion. The goal was to get you to the point where you simply give up. Not because you were wrong, but because you are too tired to keep going, and giving up looks from the outside like concession. This tactic is brutally effective on intelligent people, specifically because intelligent people have high tolerance for complexity. They don't give up easily on difficult conversations. They don't walk away from problems. They have been trained by education, by their own values, to sit with hard things and work through them. That persistence, which is a genuinely admirable quality, gets turned into a tool of control. The more you persist, the more material they have to work with. The longer you stay in the conversation, the more exhausted you become. And exhausted people make concessions. Exhausted people apologize for things they didn't do. Exhausted people agree to things they never would have agreed to if they'd been operating from a place of clarity. The exhaustion doesn't always happen in a single conversation either. Sometimes it is stretched across weeks and months. A slow accumulation of unresolved conversations, of topics that keep being brought back up, of issues that are never allowed to be put to rest. You end up living in a constant state of low-grade mental drain, always on the edge of a conversation you can never quite finish, always managing something, always defending something, always explaining something. Your mental bandwidth is permanently occupied. And a person whose mental bandwidth is permanently occupied has no room to step back and see what's actually happening to them. That full occupation of your mind is not a side effect of the relationship. It is the point of the relationship, from their side. As long as your mind is full of them and their chaos, it has no space to clearly assess the situation and make a decision that moves you away from them. You are trapped not by force, but by the sheer cognitive weight of never-ending, never-resolving conflict. Gaslighting. The architecture of self-doubt. Now we get to the deepest layer, the one that does not just control your behavior in a single conversation. It restructures how you relate to your own mind. This is gaslighting, and it is one of the most psychologically damaging things one human being can do to another, precisely because it attacks not what you think, but how you think. It doesn't just give you the wrong information. It teaches you to distrust your own ability to receive and process information. Let's be clear about what gaslighting actually is. It is not just lying. It is not just disagreeing with your version of events. It is a systematic, sustained assault on your confidence in your own perception, memory, and emotional experience. It is the repeated experience of being told directly or subtly that what you remember didn't happen, that what you felt wasn't real, that what you experienced was a misinterpretation, that the version of reality you are living in is unreliable. And here is why it works so devastatingly well on intelligent people, because intelligent people actually take seriously the possibility that they could be wrong. They have intellectual humility. They understand that memory is fallible, that perception is subjective, that emotions can distort interpretation. These are all things that are genuinely true about human cognition, and the manipulator exploits every single one of them. That's not what I said. You remember exactly what they said. But you've also read enough to know that memory isn't perfect, so you waver. You start to wonder, were you sure? Could you have misheard? You're overreacting. You felt hurt. The hurt was real, but now you're reviewing whether the feeling was proportionate, whether you're being too sensitive, whether your emotional calibration is off. And while you're doing that internal audit, the behavior that caused the hurt is receiving zero scrutiny. I never agreed to that. You are almost certain they did. But almost certain starts to feel like doubt, and doubt is all they need. Gaslighting does not work all at once. It works over time, in small doses, each denial slightly chipping away at your confidence in your own inner experience. And by the time the damage is significant, you don't realize how far you've drifted from your own reality. You just know that you feel confused all the time, that you second-guess yourself constantly, that you've stopped trusting your instincts, that you feel crazy, not violently, dramatically crazy, but quietly, persistently, exhaustingly unsure of your own mind. This is the goal. A person who doesn't trust their own perception cannot make clear assessments about what is happening around them. A person who constantly questions their own memory cannot confidently hold someone accountable for what that person did. A person who has been taught to doubt their own feelings will always prioritize the manipulator's version of events over their own lived experience. The intelligence trap reaches its apex here, because the smarter you are, the more genuinely committed you are to epistemic humility, to getting things right, to not assuming you're always correct, the more effectively gaslighting can be weaponized against you. The very qualities that make you a thoughtful person become the mechanism of your own psychological undoing. And this is why so many intelligent, self-aware, emotionally mature people end up in exactly these situations and cannot understand how they got there. They assume that if something like this were happening to them, they would see it. They are wrong, not because they're not smart enough, but because their intelligence is what makes them susceptible to it. The weapon was made specifically for someone like them. There is another powerful tactic, the social proof trap. Unlike direct manipulation, this one doesn't attack you alone, it attacks you through imagined consensus. It shows up in phrases like, "Everyone agrees with me," "No one else has an issue with this," or "Even your friends think you're overreacting." The goal is simple, to make you feel isolated, as if your view is not just wrong but uniquely wrong. This works because humans naturally use social feedback to calibrate reality. When we believe many people think something, we assume we may be wrong. That's not weakness, it's how social intelligence works. But manipulation exploits this by faking consensus. Notice how vague it always is. No names, no specifics, no verifiable sources, just everyone. And everyone cannot be questioned. You cannot check it, challenge it, or confront it. It is an invisible crowd designed to overwhelm your confidence. The result is psychological isolation. You begin to feel like you are the only one seeing things differently. And when you feel alone in your perception, your certainty weakens. You start doubting yourself more than the situation. That's the real danger. Because once you stop trusting your own read of reality, you begin outsourcing it. And slowly, the person who introduced doubt becomes the same person you rely on to remove it. That shift from independent perception to dependence is the entire point of the tactic. We need to talk about empathy, because empathy is not just kindness. It is emotional intelligence. It allows you to understand others deeply, to feel what they feel, and to respond with care. But in the wrong hands, your empathy becomes something else entirely, a leash. The empathy leash works when someone learns that your compassion activates automatically in response to their pain. So when you raise a concern or set a boundary, they shift into emotional distress. Suddenly, the focus is no longer your concern, it is their suffering. And because you are empathetic, you stop, you soften, you comfort. Your original point disappears. Sometimes it is direct emotional pain, and sometimes it is helplessness. I don't know what to do, I'm struggling. In that moment, your protective instinct overrides your boundary. You help instead of holding firm. And again, the issue you raised is never addressed. The key distinction is this: real emotional pain is valid and deserves care. But repeated, well-timed emotional collapse that consistently appears whenever accountability is near becomes a pattern, and patterns matter more than moments. The difficulty is that calling it out feels dangerous. If you are wrong, you risk becoming cruel or unfair, so your empathy keeps you silent. You assume good faith. You respond kindly, and the cycle repeats. Recognizing this does not mean becoming cold or unfeeling. It means holding two truths at once. You can care about someone's emotions while still noticing when those emotions always appear at the exact moment accountability is discussed. That awareness is what breaks the leash. Recognizing manipulation in real time is harder than understanding it in theory. In the moment, emotions are active, tone feels convincing, and confusion is intentional. But there are three signals that cut through everything. First is directional drain. After a normal, difficult conversation, you feel some clarity even if it hurts. Something gets resolved or understood. But after manipulative interactions, you feel drained, smaller, confused, or emotionally hollow. You can't explain what changed, only that you lost energy and certainty. That consistent loss is a warning sign. Second is goalpost movement. In healthy disagreement, the topic stays the same even if opinions differ. In manipulation, the subject constantly shifts. When you answer one concern, another appears. When you clarify one point, the discussion resets. If you realize you've been pulled away from the original issue multiple times, you are not in a fair debate. You are being prevented from reaching closure. Third is identity substitution. The conversation stops being about what happened and starts being about who you are. Your concern becomes you are too sensitive. Your boundary becomes you are controlling. Your logic becomes you are difficult. When the focus shifts from actions to attacking your character, the argument is no longer about truth. It is about destabilizing your self-image. These three signals, drain, shifting targets, and character attacks, don't require overthinking. They only require awareness. Once you learn to notice them, you stop getting lost in the confusion and start seeing the structure behind it. This is what actually matters, not theory, the protection of your mind without losing who you are. These are not tricks or ways to win arguments. They are ways to stay mentally clear in conversations where your reality gets distorted. First, stop over-explaining after you've made a clear point. The more you explain, the more material gets twisted. Say it once, clearly, then stop. Your clarity does not need repetition to be valid. Second, name patterns, not accusations. Instead of "you are manipulating me," say what repeatedly happens. "Whenever I raise this, the topic shifts." You are describing behavior, not attacking identity, and behavior is harder to escape. Third, use silence. Do not rush to fill gaps. Silence removes emotional fuel and forces the other person to sit with what they said. Often, the pause reveals more than words ever could. Fourth, anchor your reality in evidence. Write things down when confusion starts building. Not paranoia, just clarity. A simple record protects your memory when it is being questioned. Fifth, reduce emotional output when needed, not coldness control. When you stop giving intense reactions, you stop feeding the dynamic that depends on them. Together, these are not defenses that shrink you. They are boundaries that preserve you. They let you stay intelligent, empathetic, and aware, without becoming easy to distort. What happens when these patterns don't appear once, but become the normal way someone treats you for months or even years? Over time, it doesn't break your intelligence. It breaks your confidence in it. You start doubting your instincts because they keep getting challenged. You stop speaking up because it always leads to stress or conflict. You stop expecting fairness because you've seen so little of it in this dynamic. Slowly, you adapt, and from the outside, it looks like growth. You become more patient, more understanding, more calm. But internally, it is not growth. It is shrinkage, a quiet reduction of self-expression disguised as maturity. And this often happens to the most empathetic, thoughtful people, the ones most willing to believe the problem is them. So they adjust more, they explain more, they try harder, and each adjustment is mistaken for permission to continue the same pattern. The truth is simple. Your intelligence was never the problem, and neither was your empathy. The problem was the dynamic you were placed in, one that quietly used those qualities against you. Recovery does not start with force. It starts with permission. Permission to trust your perception again. Permission to say, "This feels wrong," without overproving it. Permission to hold your ground without constant validation. Because the moment you recognize the pattern while it is happening, you are no longer fully inside it. That awareness alone creates distance, and that distance is where you start to get yourself back.